The woman living across from us didn't share much with us, but she had something I desperately wanted. My husband David and I lived in Moskill, right on the edge of Nocton, bordering Barton, its troublesome counterpart. Between our house and hers lay a dual carriageway and then railway tracks marking the boundary between the two towns. Our home, like most on the Nocton side, was grand pillared porch, tall walls, imposing gates. It was far too big for just the two of us, but David enjoyed showing off. The house had been built before the carriageway existed, which made it more affordable back then. Opposite us, across the road and tracks, stood a run-down council house, walls mottled and grey, windows grimy. Their back faced the tracks, so I could see straight into their kitchen and bedrooms, plus their neglected garden. I spent a lot of time at home, working 4 days a week at Chauncey C of E Primary School. One of my favourite pastimes was sipping hot chocolate by the front window, watching those neighbours I'd never met. Our life was comfortable, if quiet. Most of our money went toward the mortgage and David's toys. We spent evenings on the sofa, watching TV, living through stories on screen or through the gossip of friends and family. I loved hearing about their trips and parties, catching up on the phone for hours. David and I shared a warm, respectful love. There was a gentle ease between us, like wrapping yourself in a soft blanket. But those neighbors, well, they were endlessly fascinating. Their house was about the same age as ours, but poorly kept. It was semi-detached, and I sometimes glimpsed the street beyond a narrow side passage. They had a large family with constant comings and goings, often late at night. Police cars showed up from time to time, blue lights flashing. The mother looked to be in her mid-30s, with at least 7 kids, 2 grown sons who were probably in their late teens or early 20s. I suspected there were multiple fathers, judging by the differences in the children. And judging by her pregnant belly, another was on the way. Her partner was usually in the garden, sitting on a faded chair with a beer and a newspaper. I doubted he worked, which was one reason David disliked them. David's work ethic was fierce, and he hated men who didn't pull their weight. Whenever I watched the neighbors, David would come join me, sneering and making cutting remarks. We'd developed a habit of mocking them together. It wasn't very kind, but it gave us something to laugh about over a glass of wine before our favorite TV shows. Still, despite the mockery and my pity, I envied that woman. Everything we had, the house, the nice car, the boat barely used, meant nothing compared to what she possessed. A working womb. That was her wealth, the one thing I longed for but could never have. David and I had been trying for a child for 9 years. Doctors confirmed it wasn't him, it was me. Multiple rounds of IVF failed, and eventually, we stopped talking about it. The subject was too painful. The last time we did, I cried for hours. I blamed myself and hated what I couldn't change. Watching her bear child after child only deepened the ache. What had she done to deserve such fortune? What had that family done? They lived off the state and caused trouble. Yet God had given them the one thing I craved most. I became obsessed with that woman, convinced she was mocking me. When she sat outside with her beer-drinking partner, I imagined she was flaunting her baby bump just for me. She knew I was watching. She knew about my pain. We might mock them, but I imagined their laughter aimed back at us. We had money and comfort, but they had life itself. She filled my thoughts on my commute, during traffic jams, in bed when David pretended to be asleep. Alone, I would shout in frustration, demanding to know why she had such luck, why I was cursed with emptiness. Tears came unbidden, followed by silence, then fresh sobs, my head hanging low in shame. One night, David dozed on the sofa below while I watched from the bedroom window. The woman and her partner were arguing fiercely in their kitchen. Their windows and ours were open, and I could hear her sharp cries and his angry shouts across the empty road and tracks. My eyes burned and then overflowed. I covered my face and mouth, desperate to muffle the sounds, fearful David might hear and come upstairs. I couldn't bear him seeing how broken I truly was. Then I lifted my head and glanced once more toward their house. In a quiet, almost breathless whisper, I murmured. I would give anything, truly anything, to be as fertile as she is. And with that simple wish spoken aloud, everything began. I didn't realize it had started until 2 weeks later, by which time that moment at the window had completely slipped from my mind. I was late. That was the sign. It wasn't unusual on its own, it meant nothing concrete. But to me, a woman desperate for a child, it meant everything. It meant hope in the wilderness. Over the 9 years we'd been trying, this had happened half a dozen times. Each time, I had believed against all odds, against every doctor's prediction, that this was it. The first 3 times, I'd told David, squealing with joy as if it was a certain confirmation. But that hope always came with a crushing heartbreak. After that, I kept quiet, barely mentioning it to David. Inside, I was desperate to take the home pregnancy test, waiting, then feeling the slow sting of disappointment settle in. The instructions said 5 full minutes to confirm a negative. Those minutes felt like a death sentence to my hope. Staring at the place where 2 lines should appear was unbearable. And there was always only one. Negative. The 4th and 5th times were lonely, silent despair, hidden away after David left for work. By the 6th time, my faith was wavering, but it still flickered faintly only to be met with devastating disappointment. Now, the 7th time, I surprised myself. When I noticed I was late, I no longer allowed myself to imagine the impossible. That hope was dead and gone. I waited 6 full days past when I expected my period before I dared to dream. By then, I woke up nauseous, violently sick. As I retched, vomit spilling on the floor, into the toilet, in my hair I froze, realizing what this might mean. I stiffened before the next wave hit. Still, I didn't tell David. I waited until he left for work, called the school to say I couldn't come in, then sat quietly for a few minutes gathering myself. Afterwards, I walked to Fairgate Pharmacy, a small shop opposite the garage by the dual carriageway on the way into town. Half a mile away, but distance meant nothing. I would have walked 10 times that far if I had to. It's hard to explain my state of mind as I climbed the stairs back home. Words couldn't pin it down. I opened the test kit, performed the awkward act of peeing on the stick, then sat on the toilet with my underwear around my ankles, staring. Waiting for the lines. Maybe praying. Murmuring quietly. Willing those 2 lines to appear. Wishing for the impossible, to prove every doctor wrong. And slowly, in the small oval window, first one, then 2 lines came into focus. I stared. Mouth open in disbelief. My hope had passed at least a year ago. All that remained was wonder. Then, as the truth of what I saw spread through my mind, I suddenly remembered the dark wish I'd whispered at the window that night. And for the briefest moment, a flicker of fear touched me. I was pregnant. It seemed impossible. But it was undeniably true. I covered my face with my hands and then broke down into tears, tears mixed with laughter, my eyes blurred but streaming. As the tears dried, I laughed aloud, then sobbed again. It took me nearly half an hour to pull myself together. When I finally did, I looked a mess, but with the goofiest grin reflecting back at me. A baby. My very own to hold, cuddle, and love, a son or daughter to guide through life's maze. I couldn't wait. I just couldn't wait. Then, a strange thought stopped me. I frowned. Leaning closer to the mirror, I touched my face. I'd heard somewhere, maybe on a documentary, that trauma could cause changes like this. But to see it myself. My eyes had changed color. Always a deep dark brown, they were now a pale icy blue, almost gray. It was so startling that it almost made me forget the miracle growing inside me. But that was only for a moment. Remembering the tiny life within, even something so strange seemed insignificant. It was just a distraction from the most important thing that had ever happened. I looked again, more closely. They were definitely different. The only explanation I could think of was that the emotional storm, stress, relief, excitement, had caused it. It didn't matter. I didn't care. I was going to have a baby. I picked up the phone and dialed David's office number, stopping just short of the last digit. He worked in the business park downtown, overlooking the river, close enough to be home within 15 minutes without traffic. I knew he'd be there if I called. I pictured his rosy cheeks, his smiling face. There was a bottle of champagne tucked away in the pantry. He'd insist on opening it. Just a sip for me, of course. He'd call his mother, chatter excitedly about baby names. I could see it all playing out clearly in my mind. But instead, I hung up, shutting down that imagined scene. It was too soon. I needed time to process this on my own before it slipped beyond my control. One test didn't prove anything. It could be wrong. Or worse, I might miscarry. So many things could go wrong and ruin everything. I decided to keep it secret. For now. I'd tell him about my eyes changing color, we could puzzle over that. But the baby? Not yet. Not until I felt ready. I gently stroked my belly, aching for the bump to grow, for the moment when I could finally feel safe that this was real, that my dream was coming true. Time passed, but my restless excitement stayed. I couldn't settle. Eventually, I found myself at the window, my old spying spot, looking across at the grey house. The husband wasn't around today, but I saw movement in the kitchen. It was her. There, I whispered. That proves it. You're not the only one who deserves this. It's mine now. I looked down at my belly and the secret it held. The magic is mine. I woke with a dry mouth and a fuzzy head. Daylight had shifted, it must have been around 6. I'd fallen asleep sprawled across the bed, mouth agape. I didn't even remember lying down. Sitting up, I rubbed my temples, unsure what had woken me. Then a car door slammed outside. David was home. I quickly smoothed my hair and adjusted my clothes, trying to rub away the lingering headache, but it lingered. My hand went to my belly again, and a spark of excitement flickered. I couldn't wait to tell David. But then I remembered my choice to keep quiet, and a cold wave of doubt and regret washed over me. It wasn't time. Not yet. Later, when I was sure. Then we'd celebrate. Laura. David called up. Up here. I cleared my throat, frowning. I'm up, cleared it again. In the bedroom. Better. Maybe I was coming down with something. Footsteps on the stairs, then David opened the door. Why are you sitting in here? You should be downstairs slaving over my dinner. His grin faded. Are you okay? Yes. I cleared my throat again. Just a cold, I think. Maybe laryngitis. I'd been asleep. Didn't you go to work? No, the lie made me tense. I wasn't feeling well this morning. It's going around my office, too. You probably caught it from one of those grubby kids you deal with. I gave a small laugh and smiled. There's something different about you, David said. Just tiredness. No, something else. I thought he might mention my eyes. I suddenly remembered them, but he didn't. Your skin, he said. Did you get new makeup or something? No. Moisturizer? No. Nothing. He shrugged. Probably just the light. Or being sick. He loosened and removed his tie, shrugged out of his jacket, ending the conversation. I went to the bathroom, pinching the bridge of my nose, clearing my throat but unable to shake whatever was stuck. I pulled the cord, switching on the harsh light. Looking at myself, it was obvious something was different, my eyes. If David hadn't noticed, he was blind. Maybe that was what he meant. But I held my arms out in front of me, palms facing down, elbows lifted. I looked paler than usual. Touching my face, I finally understood what David meant. My skin was much paler, almost shiny. Thanks to our frequent trips abroad, I usually had some tan, even in the darker months. Either I was coming down with something, or the pregnancy was unsettling my body. My skin had taken on a greyish cast, and dark circles shadowed my eyes. I stood there, hands cupping my cheeks, staring at my reflection for a long moment before lowering them and shaking my head. I just needed rest. My body was changing, preparing for the baby. I had to let nature take its course. "When's dinner ready?" David called from the bedroom. "Soon," I replied, swallowing hard and clearing my throat. I must be getting sick, my voice sounded off. I decided to put the kettle on, then make myself a steaming mug of hot chocolate. I'd eat with David, then soak in a hot bath with bath salts, and go to bed early. Sleep was exactly what I needed. Lots of it. I stuck to my plan, asleep by 8:30 and out cold by 8:45. David coming to bed didn't wake me. I slept deeply. He left in the morning while I still lay asleep. Fridays were my day off anyway, I was like a log. When I finally woke, I felt like I'd had the best sleep ever. Though I didn't remember them, just beyond my mind's eye were fragments of vivid dreams. I felt like I'd run a marathon and then slept the perfect recovery. I'd never woken so relaxed yet lethargic. I rubbed my eyes and yawned. Then yesterday's surprise returned, and I smiled brightly. I was so excited. I wished I'd told David, but it was too soon. Maybe I'd spill the secret over a weekend meal. We could celebrate somewhere special, maybe stay overnight. Rolling onto my side, I frowned in confusion. I touched my belly, gasped, and threw off the covers, turning onto my back. My stomach was swollen, round and bulging, the fabric of my nightie stretched tight around it. I pushed myself up with effort, staring wide-eyed at the impossible sight. It couldn't have grown this fast. To reach this size, I'd have had to sleep for 6 months. I must be dreaming. But I wasn't. "Oh my God," I whispered. I stroked the bump, tracing its shape. This growth was unreal. Struggling to the bed's edge, I set my feet on the carpet and pushed myself upright, feeling off balance. I swayed, then staggered toward the bedroom door, clutching the banister for support. Leaning against the bathroom frame, I caught my breath. Every muscle felt weak, as if overstrained. Resting a hand on my chest, I took a deep breath before entering the bathroom. Staring in the mirror, my stomach looked huge, the belly of a full-term pregnancy. My nightie strained to contain it. It couldn't be real. How was this happening? Something about my reflection seemed wrong, but I was too focused on my stomach to notice. Then I glanced up at my face and back down to the bump. My mouth dropped open, and I lifted my head to meet my own eyes, shocked. That wasn't me. Not the face. Not the hair. I stepped closer, touching the top of my head and the side of my face. The person staring back at me was a stranger, equally stunned. My hair was much shorter, spiky and bushy on top but shaved close beneath my ears, and stark white blonde. I'd always been a brunette with shoulder-length curls. It looked awful, and felt strange under my fingers, dry and unfamiliar. It wasn't my hair. My face was completely different, narrower features, a longer, larger nose, and a smaller chin set further back, making it look weak as it blended into my neck. The pale grey skin from the night before had worsened. I looked sickly, with dark shadows under my eyes. My cheekbones now gave my face a hollowed appearance. Even my lips had changed. Once full and rosy, now small, thin, and colorless. My mouth looked harsh instead of warm. I shook my head, closed and opened my eyes again, running my hands over my cheeks, forehead, nose, mouth, and weak chin. The sensation was real, confirming what my eyes saw. I'd gone to sleep pregnant with my own body and woken up halfway through my second trimester in someone else's. I don't know how long it took me to fully grasp what was happening. When I finally did, I just stared at myself. I touched my hair, my face, and my swollen belly again. Lifting the hem of my nightie, I looked down at pale, skinny legs leading to completely different feet. My own feet had always been dainty and neat. These were bigger, with the second and third toes longer than the big toe. A subtle difference, but to me it was huge. I examined my hands, front and back. They were different too, longer, narrower fingers with shorter nails. Some nails looked recently broken or trimmed. "This can't be real," I whispered, but my voice betrayed me. It wasn't mine. It was higher, half an octave up, and had a different vibration deep in my throat. Blah, I tested. Blah blah blah. I shook my head in disbelief. But then my attention snapped back to the baby bump. I laid my hands gently over it and suddenly felt something, both inside and outside, a kick. Despite everything that felt strange, I smiled, tears springing to my eyes. I stroked the front of my belly, hoping to feel it again, but nothing. There really was a baby inside me. I really was pregnant. I glanced up at my reflection, then down at my stomach. It was a miracle. My most treasured dream come to life. What did it matter if it came with these bizarre changes? None of that mattered. I was going to have a baby, my own little child. That was all that counted. It was the chill that finally pushed me out of the bathroom. I walked into the bedroom, pausing in the doorway. It struck me how ordinary it all felt. I'd woken up 6 months pregnant in someone else's body, yet here I was, just standing, feeling cold. I needed to fix that. And I was hungry, I had to eat. I'd always imagined such a moment as profoundly life-altering when I was a little girl. Sure, having a child in 3 months would change everything, but right now, nothing dramatic was happening next. The real problem was what to wear. My waist had grown considerably, and I hadn't bought any maternity clothes. Maybe some of David's tracksuit bottoms would fit. I opened my wardrobe to look for anything that might work. Maybe a loose top. I didn't spot anything right away and browsed half-heartedly. Then I noticed something unfamiliar. Pushing other clothes aside, I pulled out a scoop-neck sleeveless polyester dress, patterned with leopard print, definitely not my style. But it was a maternity dress. I checked the label. Yes, maternity, for sure. That meant I hadn't placed it there. David wouldn't have either. It must have just appeared, like my bump. I thought about my sore throat from the day before, my pale skin, my icy blue eyes, the positive pregnancy test. I hadn't gotten pregnant. I had transformed into a pregnant woman. A completely different thing. Whatever higher power had done this had also provided me with a dress to start with. Shrugging, I laid the dress on the bed and slipped off my nightie. As it pooled on the floor, I got my first full look at my unclothed body, and like my face, hands, and feet, the differences were striking. Before today, my figure had been fairly proportioned, not quite athletic but curved in the right places. Now, my thighs were thin, but I had love handles and a bulging hip area. My round chests had changed shape, more pointed. They were still normal chests, but I missed my old ones. I touched my belly again, reminding myself that nothing else mattered as long as I had that. God, what will David think when I show him? My mind reeled. I looked completely different and far less attractive, but David wanted a child as badly as I did. He'd understand. He'd have to. If it came down to my old body with no baby or this new body with one, the choice was clear. I thought of my friends and mother. What would they say when I introduced myself again? I put on a bra that fit well enough and some clean underwear, then slipped into the dress, enjoying how it stretched over my new bump. Looking in the mirror, it was another woman staring back. I tried smiling and immediately frowned. Smiling made my weak chin recede further, crinkles appeared around my eyes, and my skin shone under the light. I leaned closer to inspect my teeth. They weren't as straight and a bit larger. I explored them with my tongue and fingers, then gazed into my cold blue eyes. This is the strangest thing ever, I murmured to myself. It felt true when I checked the wardrobe again and found a pair of flats that not only matched the dress but fit my larger feet perfectly. Walking down the stairs with my swollen belly and altered frame was strange. I was slightly taller now, which threw off my balance. The baby made it worse. I clung to the banister, descending carefully. In the kitchen, I made coffee and prepared cream cheese on toast, then sat at the table. I felt a bit more normal, but only slightly. The coffee was too bitter. Wondering if my taste buds had changed, I added a teaspoon of sugar. Still bitter. After 3 spoons, I could barely stomach it. I pushed it aside with a frown and bit into the toast. Ooh! I spat the bite onto the plate and fished out the rest with my fingers. It was disgusting. Shit. I shoved the plate away, frustrated. I was starving, and this was ridiculous. Touching my face, my oddly large nose, small mouth, and almost missing chin, I reminded myself I was a different person now. I couldn't expect to like the same things. Opening the fridge, nothing appealed. The first two cupboards were the same. In the third, I found a large bag of beef-flavored crisps someone had brought to a dinner party. David and I never ate crisps, and I hated beef, but they looked tempting. I cracked the bag open, took a few, and smiled. They were delicious. Tucked behind the other bottles was a whiskey. I grabbed it, poured myself half a tumbler, then returned to the table and sat down. I grabbed another handful of crisps and washed them down with a swig of whiskey. That hits the spot. I smiled, crunching crisps, then raised the glass for another sip. Wait a minute. I held the glass away, peering into the dark liquid, then glanced over at the open bottle. I almost never drank, certainly not in the morning. And I would never have touched alcohol if I were pregnant. Yet here I was, pouring myself a drink like it was the most normal thing. I slammed the glass down and pushed it away as if it were poison. Because it was. I wasn't going to drink any more, no matter what this new body of mine craved. I wasn't enjoying this. I had no clue how or why it was happening. Why had my body changed shape? Why couldn't I have just gotten pregnant? I need to pull myself together. I folded my arms and pinched the bridge of my nose. This is good. This is what I wanted. Even if it's not what I expected. I'm going to be a mother, that's all that matters. I needed some normalcy. I needed a distraction to calm my mind. I went to the lounge and switched on the TV, sinking into the sofa. I liked daytime TV on Fridays, that would do. I turned to my usual channel and crossed my legs. The hosts were interviewing a man who'd climbed the Himalayas to raise money for Ethiopian children. I got comfortable but, after 5 minutes, boredom set in. It was awful. I switched the channel. Next up was Murder, She Wrote. Jessica Fletcher was talking about the hardest crime to get away with. I flipped the channel again. A reality show was on, celebrities disguised as foreigners to prank other celebrities. I giggled and settled in. This was more like it. The first celebrity was an old Page 3 model made up to look like a black woman. They spent ages perfecting the look, then she practiced the voice. She was terrible at first but improved as she went on. Before I knew it, lunchtime had arrived. I'd watched several more reality shows, then a cooking program. I wandered to the kitchen, looking for something to eat. Nothing caught my interest. The strangest thing was that it didn't feel odd that I looked like someone else. I forgot until I suddenly remembered, and then I thought of the baby first. Maybe this wasn't such a bad trade-off. It was mostly cosmetic. Once I explained everything to David and my family, life could go on. Work might be awkward, but we had enough savings on David's salary for a while. I could get another job when the baby was older and no one would know what I looked like. Laura Blaine could be blonde for all they knew. What I needed now was to tread carefully. David was easygoing, but if anything would freak him out, it'd be me waiting for him after work, wearing these trashy clothes, looking and sounding like someone else, and 6 months pregnant. He was as straight as they come, and magical transformations wouldn't be easy to explain. I decided to drive into town and buy some new clothes that fit. At least then I could look somewhat presentable when he saw me like this. The leopard print dress was comfy over my bump, but it made me look like I belonged in Barton. I had to. Wait. I went to the hallway mirror and studied my plain features. Then I looked out the front window, across the road and railway tracks, at the grey house opposite. Frickin' heck, I muttered. Why didn't I see it before? I hadn't turned into just any pregnant woman. I'd become a very specific one. I'd never seen her close up, which is why I hadn't recognized myself in the mirror. But now I was certain. I'd become the woman from the grey house. I was truly a resident of Barton. I checked myself again in the mirror, but this time I knew exactly what I saw. Short white blonde spiky hair, dark eyes and a bigger nose, thin lips and a small chin, skinny yet fleshy arms and legs, the bulging pregnant belly. I was her twin. I had to be. I would give anything. That was what I'd said. I'd wished to be as fertile as the woman across the tracks in Sudwell who'd already had at least half a dozen kids. Whatever power answered that prayer took it literally. I was as fertile as she was. Her twin. Back at the window, I squinted across the street. My eyesight wasn't as sharp anymore. Inside the house was clear, but farther away things blurred. No one was visible. No, wait. Her partner was in the garden again, hands on his stomach, head bowed. As far as I could tell, he was asleep. The woman was nowhere to be seen. What would she say if she knew the woman across the road had become her carbon copy? She'd probably lose it. Better not let her see me, at least not before I explained things to David. But I still wanted to go to town. I drummed my fingers on the window, bit my lip, then went to the hall and opened the cloakroom. I rummaged through the coats and pulled out an old raincoat, maybe David's, and put it on. That was better. It hid the distinctive dress. A pair of sunglasses from the pocket finished the disguise. It didn't have to be perfect. She wouldn't get close to me, and I'd heard her distance vision was terrible. I grabbed my handbag and headed for the door, but hesitated. This was my first time outside since becoming pregnant. I worried something bad might happen. And people would see me looking like this ugly woman. It was embarrassing. I usually went out looking my best. In this worn raincoat and scuffed shoes, with my hair and strange new face, I certainly didn't. Well, that was exactly what I needed to sort out. I'd buy some nice clothes and makeup and get myself looking good for David's return. That was the plan. He'd already have enough of a shock without me looking awful. I opened the door, glanced out to make sure the coast was clear, and slipped outside. No one was visible around the grey house now. I didn't hesitate, I hurried to the car and let myself in. The front yard was big enough to turn the car around easily, pointing it toward the road. I checked for traffic, then merged onto the dual carriageway, keeping an eye on the grey house to see if I might be spotted. The front windows reflected the sky and hillside. No one was home. Approaching Fairgate roundabout, I considered signalling right to head into Barton. I wanted to buy a variety of clothes to fit my growing belly. Barton's high street prices were cheaper. I could get 2 or 3 items there for every one at the name brand stores in Tower Gates shopping centre. Maybe I should. Nah. I cancelled the indicator and kept going straight. I preferred one quality outfit over 3 cheap ones. But then, at Barton Mills roundabout, I signalled right again. Since David worked in town, he sometimes visited the centre on lunch breaks. I didn't want to risk running into him until I was ready. It wouldn't hurt to stop in Barton, and things were definitely cheaper there. Barton Mills was the most industrialised area of Nocton Vale, a fact since the town's biggest growth spurt near the start of the 20th century. Most old Victorian factories were long gone or rebuilt, but some still stood, most famously Cooper's Textiles, old enough to house its own museum inside part of the building. I weaved through the maze of streets searching for the way into Barton's centre. Most visitors assumed Barton was just a suburb of Nocton Vale. But no local from either town would let that slide. Barton was a separate town, with its own mayor and town hall, its own centre, and a dozen dingy suburbs of its own. I came here occasionally, a friend loved the bargains, but it wasn't often. The two towns mostly kept to themselves, with an unspoken tension sometimes noticeable, even among shopkeepers. I already regretted coming, but it was too late. I was almost at the centre. Barton's car parks were open air. I found a spot and parked, then sat quietly for several minutes, trying to summon courage. I told myself I was being silly. I wasn't ugly, just ordinary. No one would think ill of me. No one even knew me. I got out, pulled up my collar, and walked down the alley toward the shops. The day was grey and dirty, and Barton's surroundings made it feel even worse. The high street curved with charity shops and discount stores. Off both sides, narrow pedestrian streets formed a maze. The alley from the car park spit me out into one of them. It took me a moment to get my bearings. I didn't come here often, and my friend usually knew the way. Though it was the middle of a weekday, the cramped streets and shops bustled with people. The difference between Barton shoppers and those in Nocton was clear. Some were well dressed, some looked average, but most were unmistakably Barton locals: shiny shell suits, lycra tops, stilettos, short skirts, overweight women grabbing toddlers who shouted profanities. I didn't like it. I didn't know why I'd come. Anything I bought here would be as bad as what I wore now. I stopped and thought about turning back, heading into Nocton instead. But there was no time. David sometimes finished work early on Fridays, sometimes very early. I had to be back, ready for him. If I wasn't careful, it might take all night convincing him I was still his wife beneath this platinum blonde mop. I considered getting my hair done, maybe dyeing it back to my old color to ease the transition. But that would take too long. I could do that any time. I tried on some dresses at a couple of shops. The clothes weren't as bad as I feared: lots of brightly colored, skimpy clubwear and daywear, and tons of funky costume jewelry. Normally I avoided such accessories, but today they caught my eye. I stared at them, thinking some bold jewelry might help balance my new look when David first saw me, and planned to come back after I'd bought clothes. I quickly found something nice at Mirror Images, a discount store unique to Barton. It was a shorter sleeveless dress, made of shiny red synthetic fabric. On the front, it said "Spud in the oven," with an arrow pointing down to a cartoon potato on my belly. I giggled, imagining David's laugh when he saw me wearing it. I held it up to my body and glanced in the tall mirror propped against a ceiling pillar. The woman staring back was a stranger: cheap hair, trashy look, but she fit perfectly in this gaudy setting. Her mouth hung slightly open, eyes vacant. Shoppers passed behind me in the reflection, and I didn't seem out of place. I was just another Bartonite on a spree. The dress fit this body and place perfectly, highlighting the pallor of my skin. It left little to the imagination, showing more leg and chest than the leopard print dress. Disliking the vacant look, I closed my mouth and swallowed, barely noticing when my lower lip dropped open again. It wasn't anything like my usual style, but I'd look sexier in it. Maybe with some new shoes to match. Shrugging, I took it to the till, then crossed the street to Shoe Mart. I marveled at the low prices. I should shop here more often. Plenty of sexy shoes called to me. I found red stilettos and paid for them, wishing I could wear them immediately. But with my bump, walking in them would be torture. I returned to the jewelry shop and bought some big dangly earrings, hesitated, then grabbed a few chunky bangles too. The more I could dress this body up, the better. 2 doors down was an off-license. I went inside and approached the counter. "Hiya," I said. "Gimme a bottle of vodka and 20 Benson and Hedges." "All right, love." He set the items down on the counter. "And a lighter, please." He rang it up, and I handed over the money. When he gave me the change, I said, "Thanks, Tara, love," and headed back outside. Rain had started to spit from the sky. I frowned upward, popped the vodka bottle's lid, and took a quick shot. Glancing around to see if anyone was watching, I took a second. That felt better. I was about to put the bottle in the carrier bag with the dress but changed my mind, slipping it into my handbag instead. I didn't want to have to rummage for it later. Tearing open the plastic on my cigarette pack, I dropped it to the floor, placed a cigarette between my lips, and lit it. I took a long drag, drawing the smoke deep, then a second. I sighed. Now that was really better. I stood in the doorway for a while, savoring it and feeling strangely grateful this had happened, despite the side effects. Having a baby was the most important thing in the world to me. "Hey, Jenna," someone called. I turned to see a heavy-set woman with badly dyed red hair approaching, grinning. "Jenna, I thought that was you." I stepped back, realizing she thought I was the woman from the grey house. Jenna. I wasn't sure how to respond, but before I could say anything, she came close and kissed my cheek. I wouldn't have recognized you without that coat and those sunglasses, she said. What? The coat belonged to that woman too? You out shopping, then? I nodded dumbly, knowing I had no choice but to play along and hope to get away quickly. What did you get? I opened my bag. A new dress. Nice. And the shoes. Wicked. Words failed me, so I blurted the first thing that came to mind. I wanted to look sexy for me husband. He still likes giving it to me when I'm preggers. More so, the kinky buggar. The woman laughed, but fear hit me how easily those words came out. I'd known my voice was different in this body, but still, I didn't talk like that. Or at least I hadn't. Had lunch yet? I started to reply, but she cut me off. Good. Me neither. Let's do KFC. You can tell me all about the baby. She grabbed my arm and started pulling me along. Actually, I was just on my way home. Nonsense. We never get to chat at work, and you'll be off on maternity before you know it. Without another word, she pulled me into the crowd, and I didn't get a chance to protest. The heavy-set woman, whose name I still didn't know, led me to the doors of David Tucky Fried Chicken and opened one. Wait, I said. I have to finish my fag before I go in. She sighed, folding her arms. Hurry up. I took another long, needy drag and tapped the ash. Just chuck it, she said. I gotta get back to work. Wait a sec, I snapped. I still had a couple of drags left. Putting the cigarette back to my lips, I suddenly realized what I was doing. It had come so naturally I hadn't noticed. I stared at the cigarette in my hand in disbelief and disgust. I'd never smoked a day in my life, but here I was, buying a pack and lighting one. And the vodka, I'd had 2 swigs already, again like it was normal. I never drank like that. It was horrible for the baby. Why was I doing this? Come on, Jenna, said the woman. I'm starving. Smoke the stupid thing and let's get inside. Looks like it's gonna pour. I looked at the cigarette and tossed it away like it might burn me. She grabbed my arm again, but I pulled away. No, I said. I have to go. I have to get back home. Oh God, what was happening to me? This was terrible. Really? Well, make up your mind. I won't have time now. Sorry, Debs, I said. I really can't. She scowled, half good-natured. Well, see you at work tomorrow. Yeah, I replied. And then she was gone. But I kept staring after her, trying to process what was happening. Debs. How did I know that name? I didn't like this at all anymore. For a brief moment, walking those narrow streets and shopping had felt natural. But the warning signs were flooding in now. I might have gained a baby, but so much else had come with it, and I needed to face it. The way I looked wasn't the only change. It was more than that. I worried it was much more. The clothes I bought, the whiskey, vodka, cigarettes, my way of speaking, knowing that woman's name. I had to get home. Fast. I didn't like this. It scared me. I needed David to help me make sense of it. I didn't just look like the woman from the grey house. If I wasn't careful, I was becoming her inside and out. On the way back to the car, the sky opened up. A filthy dark grey blanket covered the sky, and rain poured like water from a trough. It hammered down as I squealed, running, trying to shield my head. Everyone else fled. The rain hurt, it was that heavy. I stopped at the edge of the car park. The alley gave some shelter. Outside it, I'd have none. I squared my shoulders and sprinted as fast as I could. Rain poured all around, forming deep puddles. I slammed against my car door, fumbled for the keys, and shoved one into the lock too fast. I turned the key angrily. Nothing. I stood there dazed, trying to figure out why. I tried again. Still nothing. Checking the key, I cursed. It was the wrong one, the key to David's car. I switched to the correct key, unlocked the door, scrambled inside, and spat water out of my mouth. I wiped my hair and face. The noise of rain on the roof and bonnet was deafening, but I was safe. I started the engine and carefully pulled out. The roads were hell. The number of cars seemed to have doubled. Traffic snarled at every junction. I mulled over everything that had happened as I waited for the traffic to clear, feeling my stress spike. I now fully understood what was happening to me. It was suffocating like nothing I'd ever felt before. All I wanted was to get home. Just home. This time I left Barton the other way, taking a route unfamiliar to me. The maze of roads was chaotic, almost impossible to navigate. I tried to leave the main road to avoid the jams, but it was even harder to find my way. I thought about stopping to ask for directions, but Barton residents were known to be surly, sometimes worse. It was better to rely on myself. Rain hammered down on the windshield, the wipers barely clearing it. I drove slowly, hunched over the steering wheel, peering through the sheets of water. Nothing looked familiar, and the growing feeling of being lost gnawed at me. What was I going to do? How would I get out of this? Why had I made that wish? Why had this happened to me? But I stroked my swollen belly, repeating like a mantra, I wanted this. I'm pregnant. I'm going to have a baby. That's all that matters. I turned a corner and spotted a house I recognized. Thank God. Yes, I knew this road. I knew where I was. Feeling more confident, I sped up, promising myself to stay inside for the rest of the day and just wait for David. I saw my house and smiled with relief. I pulled up at the curb, not bothering with the driveway, and opened the door, ready to face it. Then my world dropped away. It wasn't my house. Not at all. It was the grey house across the tracks. The one she lived in. But I'd driven here thinking it was home. In my mind, it felt like home. Part of me wanted to get out and run to the front door of the grey house. I was soaked. It would be nice to get inside, draw a bath, and change into dry clothes. It was so close. All I had to do was step out. But another part of me was shaken to the core. This wasn't my home. This was hers. It never would be mine. I had a nicer house and a husband who loved me deeply. I had to get back to him. I hesitated, and that's when I caught a silhouette in the front window. Standing there. Watching me. Surely recognizing me. I slammed the door, restarted the engine. I had to get back. I didn't care that I didn't know the way. I'd find it if I kept driving. I shifted into gear and floored the accelerator, lurching forward, but not before I saw the grey house's front door open and the rain-blurred figure step outside. Then she vanished in my rearview mirror, swallowed by the smudged glass of the back window. I kept driving, refusing to slow, terrified that if I did, I'd want to turn back. I had to keep moving. It didn't matter that the woman in Barton had mistaken me for her. I wasn't her, I was just a copy. She still had her life, and I had mine. She would stagger into work with that woman the next morning, whatever menial, gaudy job they had. I would be with my husband, cared for, planning a nursery. My dream was finally real. Think of that baby. Just think of the baby. I returned to the main road I'd been following. Traffic was lighter but still slow. I pulled out another cigarette, lit it, and took a deep, relaxing drag. Cracking the window slightly, I blew smoke out the side. I wondered if I could sneak another swig of vodka, then cursed myself for the thought. I'm not her. I'm not some drunk. I can control this. I have a baby coming. That's all that matters. I crossed the level crossing and turned left at Fairgate roundabout. Not far now. I was out of Barton, and leaving that place lifted the dark cloud over me. As long as I stayed away from there, I could be myself, keep my thoughts straight. I took another drag and flicked the cigarette out the window. There was no direct way home. I had to wait for the big Asda roundabout near Derrystoke at town's edge. I made a U-turn and headed back up Banbury Way until I got there, jerking onto the curb too soon and parking crookedly. Sweating, I grabbed my shopping bags and waddled as fast as my belly allowed to the front door. I pushed inside, heart pounding, and slammed the door behind me. Unaware I was being watched from across the way. It felt better to be back inside my own home, intellectually. But something was off. I didn't feel as comfortable or relaxed as I should. It was like I was in someone else's house. Yes. Walking in there, I felt like an intruder, waiting to be caught at any second. Usually, I'd come in, hang my coat in the cloakroom, then go straight to put the kettle on. This time, I took off my coat hesitantly but kept it folded over my arm. It didn't feel right to hang it up like I owned the place. Logic told me I did, but I loitered instead, peering around the lounge doorway and creeping inside as if someone might challenge me at any moment. I draped my raincoat over the back of a chair and stood there feeling awkward. I knew I should change into the new clothes I'd bought, get out of these wet things, but it felt strange to undress in this house. Still, I forced myself. I crept upstairs, still uneasy in these familiar yet somehow foreign surroundings. In the bathroom, I listened closely to make sure I was alone, even though I knew no one else could be there. Then I slipped out of the damp leopard print dress and shoes. I studied myself in the mirror, the vacant expression on this homely, weak-chinned face. I peeled off my underwear and just stood, taking it all in, the swollen belly, love handles, skinny legs, pointed chests, odd feet, and spiky mess of short blonde hair. It was remarkable, almost surreal, but I had to admit this was me in the mirror. It didn't jar as much as I thought it would. Somehow, my self-image had shifted enough that this felt like who I was now. Weird. I pulled on the new maternity dress I'd bought. It clung tightly to my curves, leaving my arms bare and showing more of my chests than the other dress. The words "spud in the oven" on the front made my thin lips curl into a smirk. I skipped bra and panties. My chilled pointers showed through the cheap fabric, but I didn't care. It looked sexy. I felt daring, knowing I wasn't wearing anything underneath naughty. It was fun. I fetched the matching red stilettos and slipped them on, gaining a few inches. I posed, turning this way and that, admiring how they lengthened my legs, while gently stroking my baby bump with complete contentment. I was pregnant. That was all that mattered. And looking like this wasn't so bad, I still looked sexy enough. I tapped out another cigarette from the pack in my handbag and lit up, taking a desperate drag that made me a little dizzy. Leaving the wet clothes and shoes on the floor, I went downstairs. In the kitchen, I boiled the kettle and made myself a mug of Irish coffee using the whiskey from the cupboard. Slumping into a lounge armchair, I sipped, smiling broadly and lighting another cigarette. I didn't feel quite so much like an intruder anymore, which was good. I settled in, crossing my legs and slowly drinking the coffee. The TV remote was nearby, so I turned it on and flipped through channels until I found an old rerun of Blind Date. Perfect. I enjoyed it thoroughly, but noticed my laugh had changed. It was now a loud, raucous, almost dirty-sounding cackle, very different from the delicate giggles I used to make. I laughed heartily and then louder still when something else was funny. But what did it matter? I was having a blast. The show was ending when I heard David's car pull into the driveway. A sudden rush of adrenaline hit me. This was it. He was about to see what had happened. I was terrified. I was sure I could convince him I was still me, but I dreaded the look of disappointment at how different I looked. At least I had this dress and the heels. They made me look sexy, exactly what was needed. I wanted him to see what I could still give him, along with the baby we'd always wanted. I smoothed my dress and took a few steps toward the hall, then froze, nervous. I'd never felt so excited and happy. He was going to be over the moon when he realized what we had to look forward to. David took his time getting out of the car. The downside of leaving early on a Friday was that he often brought work home to finish over the weekend. I waited in the hall, wringing my hands, watching through the patterned glass of the front door as he opened the back of his car and leaned in, his figure oddly bulbous. I caught a glimpse of myself in the wall mirror and was startled for a moment by a stranger's face. There was none of my old features, my mouth and eyes shaped differently, cheeks sallow, chin receding. Seeing that face shook my confidence. I worried. But surely, everything would be okay. It had to be. David's silhouette climbed the front steps and filled the door's glass panel. He fumbled with the lock, almost making me step forward to open the door, but it clicked, pausing me. The door cracked open but held steady for a moment before swinging wide as David rushed inside, slamming it behind him. He could only have caught me out of the corner of his eye. He went straight to the little table by the door, dropped his briefcase and rain-soaked files, then shook off his coat with his back to me. "Tough day out there, I can tell," he said. I replied, clearing my throat twice, painfully aware how different my voice sounded. He turned to face me. "How's your day?" His words and movement stopped as he took in my full appearance for the first time. His face flickered with shock, maybe a hint of disgust I tried to ignore, then simple surprise, and finally confused curiosity. Hi. I'm David." I tried to smile but knew how it looked, and my face burned. The unease I'd felt entering the house earlier swelled now, exposed like this, looking like this in front of what my gut said was the rightful owner. "You must be a friend of Laura's," he said, holding out his hand. "What's your name?" "It's me," I said shyly. "Jenna. Pleased to meet you." He shook my hand, and only then did I realize what I'd said. I'd used her name. When he asked for my name, I meant to say Laura but answered without thinking. David gave a warm yet forced smile, the kind he reserved for strangers, and let go of my hand. I started to stammer, thrown by the shock of identifying as her, unable to gather my thoughts. David glanced down at my baby bump, then at my chest. His eyes lingered on the pointers, and I was startled to feel moisture between my legs. He seemed to notice and blushed. He stepped past me. "Where is she?" he called out. "Laura." I wanted to say, "I'm right here," but the words caught in my throat. "I'm right here." He looked me over again, his gaze lingering longer on my legs and ankles this time. His tone was less friendly when he asked, "Is she here?" Now that it was happening, I struggled to find the words. How could I explain something so unbelievable in a way he'd understand? I was just. He disappeared into the lounge, heading toward the dining room doorway. Then I heard him moving quickly around the house toward the kitchen. "Laura, are you here?" "David." He appeared in the kitchen doorway. "She's not here." "Where is she?" I opened my mouth to answer, but he interrupted with another call upstairs. "Laura." Of course, no answer came. I didn't know why I couldn't just tell him, but there seemed to be a barrier between us. He was my husband of 11 years, yet he didn't feel like that anymore. He felt like any other man. His attitude toward me confirmed it. The only openness he'd shown so far was polite civility. Now that he was suspicious about this unfamiliar woman in his home and his wife missing, the wall came down. There was coolness toward me, maybe even some passive hostility. That unsettled me most of all. I'd never felt so alone outside the usual bubble of affection. Then he turned to face me, fully convinced his wife wasn't there. His expression was polite but guarded, eyes filled with distrust and a flicker of anger. "Where's my wife?" he asked, folding his arms. "Did she let you in? Who are you?" I forced a strained smile, feeling tense and embarrassed. "It's me, David. My name's not Jenna." I don't know why I said that. "My name's Laura." "Laura?" "Yeah." I smiled awkwardly. David glanced sideways and at the patterned glass of the front door. "Not Jenna?" I shook my head. Why lie before?" I shrugged. "I don't know. It just slipped out. But it doesn't matter. You coming in and finding me, it threw me." His face closed off completely. I couldn't understand why unless he hadn't realized it was me. But I'd told him. "What's your real name?" His eyes flicked to my chest. "Excuse me? I doubt your name's really Laura. Who are you? How did you get in? Did my wife let you in or did you break in? Are you alone? Wait a minute, love. You're getting this all wrong. I'm not explaining it right. I'm calling the police. He broke away and strode toward the lounge. Wait. Don't. I staggered after him in my heels. He was halfway to the phone. Stop. David, please. Let me explain. Give me a chance. He paused, looking back warily. Unsure, he hesitated, then turned fully to face me. Go on, he said. Tears welled up. I'd never been spoken to like that before. Hearing it from David was heartbreaking. I cleared my throat, started to speak, then cleared it again, hating my screechy new voice and how I couldn't speak properly anymore. It was getting worse. I didn't sound like myself at all. David's face was unreadable, full of mistrust. It's like this, I said, awkward and embarrassed. A week or two ago, I made a wish. I kept looking across the railway tracks, thinking I'd give anything to have what she's got. Across the railway tracks? Yeah. You mean that filthy house on Barton's edge? Yeah. Exactly. I smiled, glad he was following. I thought I recognized you from somewhere. Yeah. That's it. The grey house across the way. I kept thinking I'd give anything to have what she had. Then this morning I woke up and it was true. He kept glaring. My confidence faltered, but I pressed on. I couldn't believe it at first. It's incredible, right? But it was true. All I could think was I had to show you how sexy I was, and then it'd work out. If you thought I was sexy, you'd look past my looks, see this baby and what I can still give you, and you'd accept it. You'd learn to love me like this. He continued glaring. You see what I mean? David lowered his arms, but his hands clenched into fists. Seeing that made the blood drain from my face. So, what you're saying is you sat in that house, watching my wife and me, fantasizing about taking her place. Is that it? So you broke in here and waited for me? I shook my head vehemently. How could he misunderstand so badly? How could he think that of me? Didn't he know who I was? Where's my wife? He demanded. What have you hurt her? By God, if you have, I'll strangle you myself. He stepped toward me, and I stumbled back. No. David. Please. Listen. You're wrong. That's not how it is, I swear. I haven't hurt your wife. I am her. He sneered. I am her. I cried. It's true. Really. I'm Laura. I changed shape. I'm really your wife. David started turning back toward the phone but froze mid-motion, slowly twisting his head to look at me. What did you just say? My confidence evaporated. My voice trembled and faltered. I said, it's me, David. I'm not that other woman. I'm me. Laura. He didn't answer immediately, and I found myself rushing out more words, desperate for him to believe me, words I'd once known he would. I never thought anything would come of it. I always thought magic was nonsense, you know? But I woke up like this, turned into a copy of that other woman. At first, I didn't know what to do, but then I had an idea. I went into Barton and bought some sexy clothes to wear. I was so worried you'd think I was ugly. Blimey, David, I've been scared all day, wishing you were home. Terrified, really. But it's all right now. It doesn't matter what I look like or how I sound. I'm pregnant, see? We can have a baby and be happy. I nervously reached for a cigarette and lit it. David watched sternly as I took several quick drags. You believe me? I asked. Right. He looked at my face, my belly, my chest, the cigarette, then back to my face. I've never heard such rubbish, David said. What? You break into my house. Lie about who you are. Keep changing your story. How stupid do you think I am? But it's true, I whimpered. Really? True. He sneered, the worst look I'd ever seen on him, and said, Don't be ridiculous. People don't turn into other people. You must think I'm an idiot. No, I'm not saying that. Please, you have to listen. To what? More lies. No. It's true. Ask me anything. Ask me something only your wife would know. Get out. No, please. David. Just ask me something secret. Something that proves who I am. He pointed sharply toward the hall. Go. Get out of here. Please. Just ask. I'm not playing your sick games. But. Get out before I call the police. He pushed me toward the hall. Please, David. It's really me. You think I don't know my own wife? She doesn't look like you. Doesn't sound like you. And she sure doesn't smoke. But it's me. I cried, panic rising. I can't help how I talk. It's the magic. I can't help smoking. He forced me into the hallway, but I pulled back and faced him. Please, I whispered. Please, David. I'm not lying. I really am Laura. He glared. You really expect me to believe that? I stared back, helpless, and nodded. Then tell me who that is, he said, pointing toward the door. I looked and saw a silhouette climbing the steps, pulling out keys, fitting one into the lock. My world shattered. He wouldn't believe me. I wouldn't believe me. And here, at the door, was the one person who could prove I was a liar. The real Laura. David's real wife. For a long, agonizing minute, I just stood there, horrified, staring at the blurred figure. The worst part was that I doubted myself. I wondered if she really was the real Laura, if I'd always been the chavvy slag from Barton, living a dissolute life, pumping out babies. Maybe I'd been confused, just as David thought, that I'd come here with some insane plan to take over his life even though I'd always been her, the other woman. Jenna. But no. Surely not. I had my mind and memories. I was Laura, no matter what I looked or sounded like. Even if I smoked and drank like a sailor. I'd honestly believed I was the only one affected, that I'd transformed into her copy. I thought we could live like this, two identical women in two houses with different husbands. But clearly, that wasn't the case. Just as I had become her, she had become me. All day she must have been over there, wondering what was happening, what to do. Maybe she saw me pull up outside her house. Maybe she understood and decided to claim her new life. The key clicked in the lock, just as it had for David, and the door swung open. I knew what I'd see, but the reality shook my brain. The imposter stepped inside, wearing my clothes and shoes, carrying my handbag. She looked at me, startled, then at David, then back at me. She said nothing at first, then finally spoke. Darling. Laura. Her eyes held the cunning of an intruder. I saw her sizing us up and making a decision. Who's this? My mouth fell open in shock. She's just leaving, David said, gripping my bare arm. I caught her breaking in. She's been lying, saying she knew you. Tell him, I urged. Tell him who I am. Tell him who you are. Excuse me, she said. I don't think we've met. You're her. I said. You're the woman from the grey house. Tell him who I am. She turned to David, perfectly mimicking concern. David. What's this about? I've never seen this woman. That's a lie. You're from across the tracks. You're trying to steal my life. I wouldn't want your life, thanks, she snapped. I'm quite happy here with my husband. No. David, don't listen. She's not me. But I could see in his eyes he didn't believe me. And why would he? I showed no trace of who I once was, while she had the looks and voice nailed perfectly. David gripped my arm firmly, pushing me toward the door. I'm done with this. Get out, or I'm calling the police. With a shove, he sent me stumbling onto the top step. The rain still fell, cold and sharp against my bare arms, legs, and chest. I spun around to look inside, feeling shut out as if an invisible barrier kept me away even though the door remained open. It was like I truly was the intruder. David had disappeared from sight, but I caught the imposter's eye. There was a flicker of amusement there before he returned, thrusting my cheap raincoat and bag into my hands. David, please, I begged. I'm really your wife. I swear. Don't listen to her. She's not me. She's the one who lives over there. I pointed across the tracks. "Get off our property now, or I'll call the police," he said firmly. "I mean it. Don't test me. I know where you live. If I call and report what happened here today, you'll be in serious trouble. I've got a friend in the force. He'll make sure you're punished." "But David, just go." I glanced past him at the smirking woman who looked like me, then back at him. He wasn't going to believe me. He never would. I was trapped in my own nightmare. I lowered my head, then raised my tear-streaked eyes to him. "Please," I whimpered. He stepped back, his face empty of warmth, and closed the door in my face. The rain was thick and fine, almost invisible, yet clinging and all-encompassing. It slithered down my shoulders, arms, bare chest, and cleavage, soaked into my hair and dripped onto my face. Though I held the coat, I didn't want to put it on. It wasn't mine, it was hers. And I'd already dressed in her clothes, step by step falling into a state where my own husband no longer knew me. Putting on that coat meant accepting I was staying outside. I didn't want that. All I wanted was inside, wrapped in my husband's comforting arms. Through the blurred patterned glass, I saw their silhouettes lingering in the hallway. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to pound on the glass, demand entry. I raised my hand to strike but hesitated, inches from the surface. I looked down at myself. He was never going to believe me. The figures shifted. David's silhouette moved closer to the door. Through the glass came a muffled shout, "Get out of here. I'll call the police." Fear sent me staggering back down the steps. I imagined the horror of being arrested for breaking and entering, trapped in a police car, struggling to explain the impossible truth, then locked up at Nocton Station. I stepped away from the steps to the center of the front driveway. Still, I refused the coat and soaked through. David appeared at the lounge window, phone in hand, finger hovering over the keypad, his face clouded with anger and suspicion. Just behind him, holding his arm, was the imposter, the woman who looked like me. She smirked out of his sight, eyes bright, lips curled in mockery. I wanted to shake my fist, scream curses, but I didn't. My arms wrapped around myself, tears fell. I backed toward the open gate. Cars sped past on Banbury Way, spraying water onto my legs and dress. I stepped onto the pavement, staring sadly at my husband's unreadable face. He lowered his hands and phone but kept watching. The rain misted my eyes, making me blink away the drops. I was freezing. With no other choice, I slipped into the cheap raincoat. I pulled out a cigarette and raised it to my lips, suddenly hating myself for it. I started to take it away but caught the imposter's reflection in the window. Instead, I lit it and took a deep, calming drag. I needed this. If I couldn't go inside, this was my only comfort. David lost interest once I was off the property. He spoke to the woman and turned away, disappearing into the dark, unlit room. But she kept watching. Her gaze held mine, and I glared back. She'd stolen my life. What could I say to convince David otherwise? I'd been so sure he'd believe me at first, but now I knew he never would. We lived in a world where magic didn't exist. He'd find a million reasons to dismiss my story before accepting I'd become someone else, no matter what I said. Worse, I feared I'd forget those stories myself. I'd already called myself Jenna, already driven to her house when I'd decided to go home, already taken on her speech patterns. He wouldn't entertain a conversation if he saw me again. He'd shut down completely. He'd call the police. I knew him. There was no turning back. That realization chilled me deeper than the rain ever could. But I knew it was true. There was only one place left to go. One place I'd be welcome. I looked out over the dual carriageway, beyond the twin railway tracks. The heavy rain made it hard to see, and my dulled eyesight made it worse, but I could still make it out. The grey house. There it stood against the black clouds hanging over Barton. Waiting for me. I took one last look at my house. The imposter still watched me from the window, her smile widening as I started to walk away. David appeared behind her, scowling at me. He wrapped his arms around her, resting his head on her shoulder, and my heart sank deeper. I turned my back on them and trudged along the pavement, tears mixing with the rain on my cheeks as my sobs blended into the rumble of rush-hour traffic. Cars crawled slowly, queued at one roundabout after another, trying to leave town. I put one foot in front of the other. That was all I could manage. The baby bump made every step harder. My back ached. My ankles throbbed. I just wanted to be inside. I glanced back at the house. Through the rain and my failing eyesight, the windows reflected the dark Barton sky. I couldn't tell if they were watching me anymore. Probably not. Probably they were settling in for a warm, quiet evening while that imposter insinuated herself into my life. I kept walking, taking a swig from the vodka bottle in my handbag. What future did I have now? What grim, filthy existence awaited me across those tracks? Barton. A place I had always hated and vowed never to live in. But now, I had no choice. I was one of them. A Bartonite. It was where I belonged. Ahead was an underpass. I descended the steps and lingered at the dark entrance. Of the 5 strip lights overhead, only 2 flickered on. Long stretches of grimy shadows stretched between them. I didn't want to go through. It felt like a point of no return. If I passed beneath the road and railway, emerging in Barton, I would never leave. But I had no choice. I walked through, uneasy about the pitch-dark alcoves lining the walls where anyone might lurk. Graffiti covered every surface with endless obscene scrawls. Still, I pressed on. It was a long way. I emerged into the humid, fading daylight on the other side. The rain now lashed at my face like a sharp slap. This was Sudwell, the part of Barton opposite my old house. Mostly shabby council homes built over a century ago for Barton Mills factory workers. It was dreadful. Gardens cluttered with rubbish, rust-streaked cars decades old, blacked-out windows watching me as I shuffled through the storm, arms wrapped around my chest, wishing I'd never seen the grey house across the way, longing to be home with my husband. But I had a new husband now, didn't I? The man from the garden I had seen so many times, reading his paper. I was his wife now. There was nowhere else for me. I tried to imagine climbing into bed with this rough stranger, his coarse arms wrapping around me, the stale breath on my neck. This was my life now. I was the woman from the grey house. I was Jenna. I would live here among squalor and decay, surrounded by noisy, unruly children, always in trouble with the police. Tomorrow I would go to work in Barton Centre. The rest of my days would be spent wishing for a life lost forever. Ahead, I saw the grey house and slowed, dreading the approach. I knew that once I crossed the threshold, hope would be gone. It looked even worse now, a dreadful dwelling of filth and neglect. Everything I had hated all my life. And I knew it would consume me. I would never escape. Never. No lights shone inside. The windows stared blankly. The front garden held an old Corvette propped on blocks, its rusty, missing wheels brown with neglect, the windshield black with years of grime and leaves. A scraggly beech tree loomed overhead. This was my house now. This was where I belonged. I sighed heavily, reluctant but resolute, despite the cold and rain. I had to get inside. There was nowhere else. No one opened the door to greet me. I was alone. The porch offered scant shelter from the rain. I stopped there, fully aware of what my future held. Then I reached out, defeated, for the door handle. Before my fingers touched it, I felt something strange and sudden in my belly, a faint sensation, a little nudge from inside. A kick. I had felt it once before, but recognized it immediately again. Tears welled not from fear or sorrow this time, but from joy and hope. I'd been so consumed by the horror of my situation, the trap I had made for myself, I had forgotten the most important thing. The baby. The real baby growing inside me, developing slowly, preparing for the world. The words I whispered that night echoed back as I looked across at the grey house from my old window. I would give anything, to be as fertile as her. I would give anything. Those words struck me with their completeness. I had given everything, my body, my mind, my husband, my wealth, my life. But in return, I had this new life growing inside me. The fulfillment of my deepest, most heartfelt dream. I was going to be a mother. To hold that little baby in my arms, to see it smile and hear its laugh. To live the greatest miracle life could offer. I glanced down at my cheap clothes, this strange homely body. At the rusty wreck in the garden, the broken toys strewn beneath and around it. At the grey house that was about to swallow me whole. And in that moment, a tiny part of me felt a fearful gladness, because my dream was coming true, even if wrapped inside a nightmare. I was going to be a mother. That was all I ever wanted. Perhaps I didn't need anything else. I grasped the front door handle and turned it. It was unlocked. A pang of panic gripped me deep inside, but I pushed it aside, stroking my bump. Then I opened the door. If you appreciated this story and wish to show your support, don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content.